Hello and welcome, guys, to another episode of the Fair One podcast. I'm here to answer the questions on all the things that we've seen that have been happening in MMA this week. Not everything, but we'll give it a red hot crack. Shout out to MMA Guru who fucking cracked me up, mate, today. Made me laugh about it made me laugh watching his thing with Chael and Ariel Helwani today. It was funny. So if you haven't seen that already, go have a look at that. It was pretty funny that what he did. John Wayne says, what do you make of the UFC lawsuit involving Kong Lee? Fighters are seeking over $1 billion in damages, and the court rejects UFC's appeal to throw out the lawsuit. Trial starts in spring of next year. I think it's very interesting because I had Kong Lee on my show. Actually, you can look him up. He was on the show about 3 or 4 years ago, and he was talking about it. And I think that has got to do with something like 1,200 fighters. Yeah, 1,200 fighters that fought between 2010 and 2017, I think. And I think Cajun Johnson's got another one, 2017 onwards. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know the intricacies, the ins and outs of it, and I'm not a solicitor, so I don't know enough. And I think it's got a lot to do with the UFC's alleged monopolizing of the industry, which I think in particular during that time, I think it was a UFC or peanuts. I don't know how much you can prove that that's because of the UFC or because they just ran a better show than everybody else. I don't know. I'm trying not to give my personal opinion necessarily as opposed to what I think will happen. I think it's going to be tough to beat the UFC as well. Like, I do think that, but let's see. The thing is that would set a precedent for a lot of other things. So I don't know. I think I can't speak too much on it. I don't know. I'd just be speculating and just throwing things out there other than what I just said. Madara says, is John Jones' resume overrated in terms of him fighting many fighters out of their prime, like Shogun, Evans, Machida, and Sonnen, who are technically middleweights and would have been in today's standards? I don't think that's why his resume is overrated. I think you cannot deny that he has been busted for steroids and for performance enhancing drugs, I think several times now. You know what I mean? Like, that's the part that you can't deny. I don't think the guys that he beat or something like this, I mean, he's beaten Cormier twice. He's beaten, he's the best in as far as that. But you have to really make an effort to ignore the fact that he's been busted a whole bunch of times. I don't even understand that they moved the event when one commission wouldn't accept it. So you'd have to deny that, Nathan Gorman says Khabib was quick to close the distance and quick overall, but pundits and fans always called him slow. Why do you think they viewed Khabib this way? Was it his body mechanics? I have never thought of Khabib as slow, but one of the things that I think he has, he doesn't have like those fast hands as some dudes have. Like, say, Michael Johnson has fast hands. He hasn't got like fast hands like that. And he's not tidy when he throws, and he doesn't throw straight, fast punches down the middle, which can give the illusion that he's not fast, but he's pretty fast the way he closes distance and whatnot. So, yeah. And he's good at angling off and getting off that center line so he doesn't get hit flush. Thoughts on Merab versus Henry, rumored to be on UFC 27. It seems impossible to stop Merab avalanche of pressure takedowns. I'm going to look someone up for you right now. Because I was watching this yesterday. I was watching this fight yesterday. He fought, Kobanov from Russia. So in Combat Sambo in December 2019, I think it might have been, Davashvili fought versus Kobanov of Russia, and that fellow did a number on him. He did a real good number on Davashvili. The way that he just nullified Davashvili's game. Of course, Combat Sambo isn't exactly MMA, but he did a great job. One of these days, I'm gonna do a watch along, but I'm gonna get like the old Combat Sambo fights, like Khabib's, maybe even Fedor's Khabib's, Ikram's, Mahashev's, Davashili's, and we'll just do like an event. But I'm going to play them on the screen. I hope I'll be able to swing that. So I don't know that he'll be able to do the same thing to Henry. Like Henry's wrestling is very good, and Henry can come forward and threaten Davashili with the wrestling himself. It was very interesting if you watch that fight. If you go on YouTube and you go Merab Davashili versus Kobanov, it's a very, very interesting exchange. Kenzo Tenma says, thoughts on Benil versus Arman? Who do you think will start the grappling exchanges? I don't know who will start them. I think Arman will start the grappling exchanges because he's very grapple-heavy wrestler, very aggressive. But I think Benil will get the better of the grappling exchanges, and he's got tidier hands, in my opinion. Harris says, what did you learn from the Cejudo versus Sterling fight, in particular the grappling aspect? I don't know. I think that it just shows, in my opinion, more than just the grappling aspect, how clever Sterling was at being able to win rounds, and being able to do just enough to win a round. And I think this would have been the case even with the O'Malley fight, but he just got clobbered. Max Jamil says, "Is the even in that round, even in that first round?" Max Jamil says, "Is the UFC making the right decision by booking Benil versus Arman? Because Benil is 36 and already beat a young contender in Gamrot. If he beats Arman, you're damaging your future product." Yeah, but I mean, what do you do with Benil? What do you do with Benil? He's like he's one of the most legit guys there, and he lost to Charles Oliveira, but he was doing well in that fight as well. So I don't necessarily, what do you do? Jordan Martinez says, thoughts on Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green? Is Hooker's kicks the key to keeping Green off him? I'm not sure. You don't want to necessarily... But see, Hooker's the thing with Hooker is he's very durable, man. He's very, very, very durable. Very, very, very tough man. So he'd be someone that could get in there and trade and mix it up with Bobby Green as well and throw in a few takedowns and whatnot. I think it's going to be it's going to be a crazy fight. It's not necessarily going to be a pretty fight, but I think it's going to be thing. And Hooker's going to kick him. But the thing is that Bobby Green has a lot of stance switching. So that might make it difficult to get the timing right on those kicks, but it will definitely disrupt Bobby Green's timing as well. Light Yagami says, what do you make of Derek Lewis's career? He seems to KO anybody, but then he will lose to anybody. Also, sometimes in easy fashion, like against Ghani and JDS when he turned his back. I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't know Derek Lewis, and if I did, I wouldn't say anything. But I see people like that in sports, in different sports and in different things. And it's obviously has a God-given talent, a ginormous amount of God-given talent. It's just a question of, it's the work you don't do, that's where the big results are going to be, in the work that you don't do. And it just doesn't seem to me like, and I'm not criticizing him, he's free to do whatever he wants. But it just doesn't seem to me like he's the guy that does the extras. It doesn't seem to me like he's the guy that wants to do, extra bits. Like I see this all the time. Like if your focus is on winning, you're going to do whatever you have to do to win, whatever, everything, not just training wise, but all the stuff outside of training. That's where your focus is going to be on. But once and I'm not just talking about Derek Lewis. I can't talk about Derek Lewis. I don't know him. But I'm saying once your focus is not here, your focus is on, I want to do something else. I want to make sure this is right. Then your focus is not just on winning, And I think Derek Lewis has all the talent in the world to do whatever he wants with it. But I don't think he's crossed his T's and dotted all his I's. Madara says, thoughts on Figueiredo versus Rob Font? I'm going to go with Rob Font. He's a good boxer. Like Figueiredo can grapple, and Rob Font got held down. But I don't know. I just think he's got good punches, straight punches down the middle. Doesn't get flustered. And Figueiredo's at least going to try and box. That's for sure. And I think Rob Font can hurt him. John Wayne says last week, but I have to look at the fights closer. You're just asking me what do I think right here. I'd have to sit there and research it a little bit more before I give a proper breakdown on it. But I think Rob Font will probably do that one. John Wayne says, last week, Max Holloway called out Gaethje for the BMF belt. Thoughts on the matchup if it happens? Both guys got good chins. I think Gaethje cracks a little harder than Max. Cracks a fair bit harder than Max. Will probably be a little bigger. And it's got those leg kicks, those crazy leg kicks. But Max has the volume on you, and he just stays on you, and he just keeps throwing those punches. That will be a crazy fight. That would be a crazy, crazy fight. I think it might go the way of the Poirier Holloway fight. I think it might go something like that, like where Max gives like a very, very, very good account of himself, but I don't think he wins it. You know what I mean? I just don't see him doing it. I just want to make sure that what I'm saying here. Yeah, I think it'll be similar. It'll be similar kind of fight. I think Max can win it. He's a very, 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 very good fighter. He had two stupidly close fights with Volkanovski, like really, really close fights. So that's his level. And you saw Volkanovski in the first fight with Makhachev. Like that's Max's level. But I think that it'll be just that little step behind. And I think that Gaethje has just that little bit too much power in his shots, behind his shots, and he can take those shots early. Max is not going to get knocked out, I don't think. But you can't walk through those shots either. Funny thing, I was talking to Volkanovski about this, and he was saying to me that he'd hit Max. He would hit Max flush in their fight. He'd hit him, and he'd see Max go cross-eyed. And he thought a couple of times, nah, he's done. I've got him. And he was in like La La Land. Like his eyes were cross-eyed. They were all over the place. And then straight away, boom, he was back. So that's a scary thing. Max Jamil says, Hamzat has suffered a torn hand ligament. How bad is the injury and how long will he be out for? It depends, man. Like, not all tears are the same. Let me just see this. There's like, you can be looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, but not everyone's recovery is the same, for each thing. And now, what kind of ligament injury is it? It says, I'm just looking at something here. It says, suffered a torn ligament in his right hand victory over Kamaru Usman. It depends, man. If it's a full rupture and he has to go to surgery and stuff like that, then it's going to be completely different. If it's, it says here that it doesn't appear that he will require surgery, so it might not be a full rupture. It all depends, man. And it depends whereabouts on your hand it is, on your wrist or wherever, like what it's connecting to. And not all injuries are the same. Not everyone recovers in the same way. So I expect him to be out for sure for the rest of this year, which he probably would have been anyways. But it just depends, man. It just depends how bad that actual hand injury is. I don't know. One thing's to say, oh, so-and-so tore his ACL. There's dudes that tear their ACLs, come back, fine, no problems. There's guys that come back, tear their ACLs, continue to tear them, never come back the same. And then there's guys that never tore their ACLs and just like don't have good knees, and then they do the rehab and everything and they just don't have good knees. They have problems with their meniscus. So it's hard to say. It's a very, very hard one to say. I'd love to be able to say it's 6 weeks and he'll be right. No, but I can't say that, like responsibly, you can't say that. It just depends what's wrong with him and what's endemic to him, as well. A bad ligament injury like that, a lot of people don't understand. Like, you say if you're a grappler, in particular a grappler, and you tear ligament in your thumb, just for argument's sake, and you can't grab people, and the thumb is funny as well because it's not just rendered useless, it also gets in the way. So it's not like you can just like, oh, it's a pinky, I'll tape them up. No, it gets in the way. So that would have affected his ability to grapple immensely in that fight, and he is a grappler. Kelvin Gastelum versus Sean Brady got announced. Thoughts on the matchup? to me, Kelvin Gastelum's a kind of like a Derek Lewis in that he's got all the talent in the world. I don't know. He's an enigma. And in particular, he's an enigma to me at welterweight because I don't even know if he'll make the weight. This is the truth. I don't even know if he'll make the weight. And I don't even know if he'll make the weight healthy. If he makes the weight healthy and he fights to his potential, he can beat anyone at welterweight in particular. Sean Brady's a very, very good fighter. He had that loss against Bilal Muhammad, and of course, everyone shits on you when you lose. But he's a very, very good fighter in his own right. And he does, in my opinion, have like more of the momentum than Kelvin Gastelum has. Let me just look this up really quickly. We're looking at, he's lost one fight against Bilal Muhammad. Beat Michael Chiesa, beat Jake Matthews, beat Michael Chiesa by a decision, beat Jake Matthews was arm triangle choke. Like he's got some decent names in there, that he's beaten. So I don't know. And then he lost to Bilal Muhammad. I saw that fight, and full credit to Bilal Muhammad. Looked really good doing that. Kelvin Gastelum hasn't got a lot of momentum behind him. He hasn't got a lot of momentum behind him. He hasn't won a lot of fights in the last 5 years. He hasn't won. He's probably won 2 or 3 fights, if that. Yeah, he's won 2 fights since. So he beat Jacare in May of 2018, right? He beat Jacare in May of 2018, and that was a split decision. Against Jacare, and Jacare already at this stage wasn't Jacare anymore. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't that. Then he's got a loss to Israel, a loss to Darren Till, which hasn't aged well, a loss to Jack Hermanson, which hasn't aged the best, a win to Ian Heinich, which hasn't aged the best. Then he lost both to Jared and Rob, which, I mean, he wasn't going to beat those dudes, I don't think. Then he's got a win against Chris Curtis. That's his only other win since 2018. So he's got 2 wins in 5 years. But I'll tell you what I think. I don't think he would have beat Chris Curtis if they hadn't had the head clash. And it looked like Kelvin Gastelum dropped him. It looked like Gastelum dropped him, but it was actually a head clash in the second round. So there's not a lot of momentum behind Gastelum. So I don't know. I don't even think that's a win, to be honest with you. But all right, let's say that's 2 wins in 5 years and 5 losses. I don't know how he's going to look at welterweight. That's a big thing. I just don't know how he'll look. It's a complete enigma to me. If he makes the weight and he makes it healthy, he's got a lot of talent. Nathan Gorman says, when Bilal beat Brady last year at UFC 280, I was surprised Brady didn't attempt any takedowns. Plus, Bilal's striking impressed me. His striking also impressed me when he fought Burns this year. Thoughts? Again, I don't have enough. Like Bilal's always to me the way I see him, and this is no disrespect to him. I've always seen Bilal as a very like meat and potatoes kind of fighter, and like he backs himself. He's a physically strong guy. But I saw him in that fight with Leon Edwards. It looked like Leon was a class above Bilal. I don't know that Bilal has made the gains necessary to compete with like a Leon or someone like that. But I don't think like, I don't know. But Sean lost the fight. You know what I mean? He lost a fight. I don't know that Gastelum has, like, Gastelum to me is like looks like he's more talented than Bilal, but I don't think that he's Bilal looks like like I said, he's very meat and potatoes, but he does the work. Gastelum looks like he's more talented, but he doesn't. So, and I don't know what he's going to look like. I don't know if he's going to make the weight. I don't know if he's going to look healthy. I don't know this, So it's going to be interesting. Jailton Almeida said he tries to learn off Khabib. How much of Almeida's ground has he took from Khabib's game? I don't know. It's very different, man. One dude's like a heavyweight, jiu-jitsu background. I don't know. It doesn't look like a hell of a lot like Khabib. Like when you say Almeida, I don't think Khabib, But sometimes it's not just that obvious stuff, A lot of the times it's things you might learn from how he approaches a fight or what to do in a certain position, but you're not going to necessarily emulate your whole game on him. When Khabib and Kamaru were both champions, I always wondered what Khabib could do at 170 versus Usman. However, it seemed like a bad matchup for Khabib, even though he had better judo and jiu-jitsu. Thoughts? I think it's one of those things where it's like, I've said this a million times with this, like Volkanovski versus Islam. Can Volkanovski go up and do a good showing? Yes, he can. Yes, he can. But he loses the mechanical advantage that he has at featherweight. At featherweight, Volkanovski would be something out of a nightmare for a smaller featherweight, because the strength and the mechanical advantage that he has, just with his strength and just his body type and that, it's ferocious, dude. It's something very, very, very scary. I think that that Khabib loses that advantage that he has at lightweight when he go up to welterweight. Could he go in there and make it a fight against Usman? Of course he could. Of course. But I'd have to back Usman in his prime just because of the size of him compared to Khabib. Like, he would be a bigger man, the same way that Islam was a bigger man against Volkanovski. And you see it, the more times they'd fight, I'd say the advantage would always go to Islam. It doesn't mean that Volkanovski can't win a fight here and there. Fucking oath he could. He's a legitimate beast. He's a monster. But he has the advantage at featherweight. That's why he cuts to featherweight. That's why Khabib cuts to lightweight, because you have the advantage. That's why Usman fought at 170 because you want to have the biggest advantage you can. Harry DeLuca says, who do you think would win in a street rules fight between MMA Guru and Ariel? Well, Harry, I think you're being silly with the question there, mate, because as Ariel will tell you, in the street, there are no rules. So I don't know. In that kind of fight like this, man, Ariel would probably use a knife or acid or, other weapons, lock in a sock, that kind of stuff. Whereas I see MMA Guru being a more honorable man. I don't necessarily see him turning up to what should be just a straight no, just a normal fight. I don't see him turning up with a lock and a sock. I don't see him turning up with a homemade shiv from a toothbrush. Or I don't see him welding a razor to an old toothbrush. I don't see him necessarily doing that. But I do see Ariel doing something like that in a street fight. I do see Ariel hiding a razor in his mouth, for example. I can see him doing stuff like that. So in those types of fights, I think Ariel would win. I think Ariel will win, and he'd win it handedly. In a fight where they've been checked, like it's like a hand-to-hand combat fight, I think MMA Guru beats him. He beats him. Like, he's bigger, stronger guy, has a Taekwondo background. He beats him. I think he beats him like that. Let's do a survey. Let's do a poll. John Wayne says, who's the featherweight GOAT in your opinion? If it's Aldo, what would Volk do to surpass him? Is another victory over Topuria enough? Man, it's hard to compare people outside of their era. You know what I mean? So I definitely have I have Aldo, Holloway, Volkanovski. You know what I mean? Like, not necessarily in that order. And I'll probably put, because I was still both in their primes, so Aldo has to go. Volkanovski has to go above Holloway. But I don't know between. I go Volkanovski because I know him. You know what I mean? But if I'm going to be absolutely objective, I don't know, because in his prime, when Aldo in his prime like that, he was just an amazing fighter, and he went down a weight division in his career, which is not, you don't often see it late in his career, fighting at bantamweight. So it makes you think as well. He was like a smaller featherweight. People always talk about how big he was. He spoke about going up, but he went down when he was like later in life. So, like, makes you think as well what he could have achieved as a bantamweight. had he have fought at bantamweight earlier. Maybe if he had fought at featherweight, defended a few times, and then went down to bantamweight, who knows what he would have achieved at that point? I don't know. But in terms of people that look unbeatable, like, I mean, I don't know. It's split between Aldo and Volkanovski, and it's not. I just can't think of anyone really beating Volkanovski, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, at featherweight, I just think it'd be really, really difficult fight for anybody. Whereas Aldo had things that maybe you could have done. You know what I mean? But Volkanovski seems to have most of the bases covered, in my opinion. Madara says, how good was Eddie Alvarez? He was supposed to fight Khabib in UFC 205. I felt like that version of Khabib might not have been ready for the well-roundedness of Eddie. Thoughts? Eddie Alvarez was very good, but Eddie Alvarez is like, if you think like a Michael Chandler, but with tidier boxing, but less power, if you know what I mean. Eddie Alvarez was a guy, in my opinion, that if you let the fight become a dogfight, it was going to become a problem for you, because he's not just some brawler. Like, he has skills as well. He has really, really good skills. No, Eddie was what he was, man. Eddie's a fantastic fighter, man. A really, really, really good fighter. He's won a bunch of belts in like all different promotions. Like, you don't win those things by accident. He is what he is, you know, physically strong, really good grappler, tidy boxing. He's very good. Light Yagami says, is wrestling the best base for MMA? If so, why is this the case? Or does Izzy and Pereira's success with no wrestling background disprove this? It doesn't disprove it. It just means that these two guys without wrestling background that are phenomenal fighters, that are two of the best kickboxers in the world, were able to do it. But having said that, rest assured that both these guys wrestle. Why is wrestling the best base for MMA? If it is the best base for MMA, this is my opinion on it. Number one is the numbers of people that do wrestling. You know what I mean? In the US and whatnot, and in the UFC, we see it's an American-based company, US-based company, and in the US you have high school and college wrestling. So you have like basically like government-funded wrestling programs. If you did that with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you had the same numbers of kids going through school doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it might have the same effect as well. Having said that, I think that wrestling also, what it does, like say rugby league here in Australia, like you'll get a lot of guys that will be good at MMA coming from rugby league. That's not because rugby is the best base. It's because you get the cream of the crop. They rise to the top. These guys are already really good athletes and they're aggressive. And if they want to fight, you're already going to be competing. Like, there's a guy that trains with us now. You know, he should have played first grade. Shout out to Trent Griffin. And like, he's not built like a normal person. He has the biomechanics of a giant baby, like, and he's really, really strong, like really, really, really strong. He's not strong like a normal person strong. He's strong like an athlete strong, you know, with really good balance and that. So the fact that you've got these programs, if you're an All-American college wrestler, that means you're finished in the top 8 in college in that year of the nation, in Division 1 or Division 2 or whatever, or what have you. Then you can go on to the US, you know, Olympic qualifiers or whatever. Say you come third at the US Nationals, like, you're a high level wrestler. If you then transition to MMA, a guy that's that's just like some of the guys in the UFC are maybe blue belt level wrestlers, you know, maybe blue belt level grapplers. Then you get a guy like Bo Nickel comes through. It's not just wrestling. It's the fact that the type of athlete that he is such a high level athlete, regardless of the sport that he did. And the fact that it's a combat sport, and the fact that you can decide where the fight takes place if you're a good wrestler. You can keep the fight standing or you can take the fight to the ground. This is another thing with wrestling that it has. And I think it's a very natural art to do. Like, it's a sport that you put two little kids together and they'll have a wrestle. You know, this is a natural, very natural martial art to do. So I'd say that that's why those like wrestling would be such a good base for MMA. But I do think that something like a catch wrestling would be the best base, folk style catch wrestling kind of thing. Something like that would be a really good base. But I don't think it's just the style. I think it's the participation numbers, because that's what makes the cream rise to the top. And judo has a lot of participants in it as well. But I think there's styles of wrestling where there's nothing to do after you finish, and you might finish at a relatively young age, 22, 23, like folk style wrestling in the US. And if you don't want to go on the Olympics, you're done. You're all American two years in a row, and you're 22 years old. You finish your college career. There's nowhere else for you to go with it. It's not like you can make the Olympics unless you want to go and wrestle freestyle. And so you get this high level athlete in a combat sport that's very applicable to MMA that can go on. Whereas with judo, if you're 22 years old and you're that kind of high level, you still could keep going to the Olympics if you want, So that's probably, I think, the my opinion on wrestling. Plus, it's just super hard sport, man. It instills such hard work in you, man. And if you do those kind of sports, any kind of mano a mano combat sport where you're grappling someone, judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, you're really imposing your will on somebody else, and you get used to doing that from an early age. It's very hard for you to combat that. Mario Gomez says, which fighters do you believe has the best IQ in the UFC, where you say they never make a mistake or rarely make one? I'd say Khabib is one of them. Khabib's one of them. He's very, he really imposes what he wants to do. Volkanovski's another. Makhachev is another one. I don't think he gets a credit for it that he deserves. I think that really impressed me was in that fight with Volkanovski, because fight IQ is not just, I'm going to do this game plan, but he kept it together, because that fight was not going that well for him. He won the fight, but it wasn't going that well. Like, he could have done, it could have been better. It was obviously not, credit to Volkanovski on that day. He really turned up, and Islam had bad moments in that fight. He had a lot of good moments too, but he had bad moments in that fight. And then, like, you see him just keep his head in the game and win, and win the fight. And I see that he's like, his reactions to winning, his reactions to losing, they're very like stoic. They're very about around the same. So I think those three guys, Khabib, Islam, and Volkanovski come to mind. Dominic Cruz is another guy, although he's not like a today fighter, but Dominic Cruz is a big one for it. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys like that. Someone that cops shit, but I actually, and they're going to say that people are going to flame me for this, but I think Vettori is a guy that has good fight IQ. He just doesn't have the natural fighting ability of an Adesanya or of a, pick anyone you want, Hamzat or whatever. He doesn't necessarily have that, but he's fighting at his top potential and doing the best that he can with it. Like, he pretty much was a very well-rounded fighter. He's dots his I's, crosses his T's, but he doesn't have the same level of talent to go the whole way. And we only look at the people that have the talent. You don't look at the guys that they might have a good fight IQ, but they just don't have the talent to follow it through. And I think he does really well with what he's been given. So I'm not even a Vettori fan. I'm just saying what I think. Nathan Gorman says, you mentioned last week Paddy versus Gordon was a robbery, but when you see one judge give it to Paddy 30-27, is there a flaw in the judging criteria scoring? By the way, that judge was Big John McCarthy's son. I don't want to get into it too much, man. Like, I don't think that, like, I didn't even watch that fight live. I remember I was at a barbecue with some friends and they were watching the fight. And I said, there's no way that Paddy Pimblett's going to lose. Like, even if Gordon slashed his throat and beat him like that and left him bleeding there, if they were still going to give him that decision. I didn't even watch it. And everyone that was watching was like, no way, Fab, you're wrong. Blah, blah, blah. and they gave him the win. Then I watched it back and I thought, dude, man, that wasn't thing. I mean, there is flaws in the judging criteria scoring, but that in that scenario, I don't think so. In that scenario, I thought that Gordon won that fight clean. You know what I mean? Yeah. Death Note says, what do you make of the whole Power Slap events? Dana was going to start his own promotion called Zuffa Boxing, but instead went for Power Slap. I don't know. I can't watch that, dude. I think that's like insane. You know, I don't know. I can't. I think the boxing is hard to do because there's so many people doing it and so many different like entities, and this would be just another one. Probably. I don't know. I'm not a super smart businessman, but the Power Slap, I don't like it myself. It'll probably do good numbers. I have no idea. Somebody asks, how good is Rodolfo Vieira's jiu-jitsu? Rodolfo Vieira's jiu-jitsu, man, he's one of the best jiu-jitsu guys to ever do it. But, and I was just talking about him today to some of the boys at training. Yeah, his jiu-jitsu is like absolutely phenomenal. I'm just looking him up now, just to give you an idea. Like, I'm just looking at his actual, I'm not going to go through every single win that he's ever had in jiu-jitsu, but some of the people that he's beat, Hiberto has beaten him. I'm just gonna real quick. He's had like a rivalry and a friendship with Buchecha, who he's lost to and won and whatever. He's got wins over Andre Galval. He's got wins over Broly Estima, Leandro. He has wins over Leandro Lowe. Rest in peace, Leandro Lowe. He's got, you know, he's got multiple wins over Andre Galval, Victor Estima. He's got, I don't want to keep going on and on and on and on and on. Bernardo Ferreira, he's beaten him several times. So how Rafael Mendez, how good is he at jiu-jitsu? That good. You know what I mean? His grappling record is 110 matches and 9 losses. His professional grappling record. And his losses are just to monsters, you know. The problem is that his application of it against the top end fighters, I think, is going to be a problem. He ran into big issues with Anthony Hernandez and Chris Curtis, and man, he got dropped by Cody Brundage. Cody Brundage is not without talent, but he seems, I don't know what he does. I don't know why he does this. It's actually out of frustration. I'm not even trying to like be mean to him, but he seems to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, you know. Like he could be a good fighter. Like he has the talent, and he wrestled growing up. He's got, his parents were athletes. I've looked him up, you know, because I'm not shitting on him. I'm actually a fan of his in the sense of like he should be better. You know, Chris Curtis is a good fighter and Anthony Hernandez is a good fighter, and they beat him. Then he's got some wins, you know, but they're not guys at the top end, you know, that he's beating. So his jiu-jitsu, fantastic. His jiu-jitsu, in as far as like in MMA, it's still applicable and he is getting better, but I don't know that he's going to get better in time. He's 34 years old now, and his striking is a little bit mechanical. He's getting better. He has improved a lot, but it's very hard to apply jiu-jitsu like that. Like, he's got a really good game. He's got good takedowns in paper. He's got good takedowns. He's a big guy, super strong, and his game is passing. He's got a pass. His game in jiu-jitsu is passing, head arm chokes. This is his game, which you would think would be really applicable in MMA. But the problem is in MMA, man, like the time that you have to do that, to apply that, is very small, because you have 5 minutes. The fight starts on its feet. The guy gets sweaty. He's not trying to do jiu-jitsu with you. He's trying to stand up. So the guard passing becomes different as well. So if you can't get this done relatively quickly, and the isometric hold, like the how much that takes out of you, it becomes really difficult fight the longer it goes. So his jiu-jitsu is really good. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's going to beat Armen Petrosyan. I don't think that, because Petrosyan, I'll tell you this, Petrosyan has good takedown defense. He's smart. He's learning a lot. He's got a chin on him. He can fight. And if Rodolfo Vieira can't get him out of there quick, if he can't get Petrosyan out of there reasonably quick, Petrosyan's going to fucking clinch with him, throw knees up the middle. He's gonna bash him, I think. No disrespect to him, but I do think he's gonna bash him. Yeah, he knows how to fight, man, and he knows how to use distance, and he's had like a few of his fights that he's had, like, yeah, no. I think he win. I think Petrosyan wins that. Jordan Martinez says, thoughts on Darren Till saying he's broke and has to sell clothes just to make ends meet. Should young fighters get out of the fight game in order to secure their financial future? I think that if you're getting into the fight game, the two separate things. I think if you're getting into the fight game to secure a financial future and you don't live somewhere like Dagestan or Thailand or something, where even if you make the UFC and you, like, I don't know, you win, you make 200 grand in a given year, right? Like, you do reasonably well, make 200 grand, and that can set you up for life in one of those countries or cities. No, you shouldn't do it. Like, that's not what you want to be doing to secure your financial future if you're from a developed country. This is what I'm going to say. Like, my advice to young guys is do a uni degree or do a trade, and in that time you train and you see if you're going to find out if this is what you want to do. When you finished your trade, you can look at doing your fighting or something like that, because fighting is brutal and there's not like a lot of ways to make money. Now, having said that, someone like Darren Till, I don't know how he's broke. It doesn't surprise me that he's broke if he says he's broke. You look, there's a documentary called Broke, and it's about NBA players ending up broke, and they make way more than the UFC fighters. I don't know how he's broke, because Darren Till's actually one of the guys that got paid well, had a pretty big following, fought ex-champions, fought for the title. Like, it depends what you do, dude. I don't know. And it depends what you do with the rest of your life and the other financial decisions you make. Harry DeLuca says, what do you reckon about Ariel and Chael's conversation went down? Ariel seemed to have an attitude towards Chael through the interview that he wouldn't be able to have in real life. The fight also apparently had 60,000 pay-per-view buys. I didn't see the full conversation. Shout out to MMA Guru. I watched it on his show. He's a funny guy, the MMA Guru. Shout out to him. I don't even know if, sometimes I think, like, with Chael and Ariel, I think, is that real? Because, like, or did they just say to each other, let's do this, and then they're having a laugh about it behind the scenes? I don't know. Maybe they are really good actors and all of that at it, because a lot of people are talking about them after that, if that makes sense. But let's say that it is real. I think that Ariel calling Chael a coward was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. Because the thing was that Chael wasn't even not saying what he said. Like, Chael actually was very clear with what he said with Ariel. The thing that I took from it, though, is that both of these guys, and they're both smart, whatever you think of either one of them, they're both smart guys. They were mixing arguments so bad that it was ridiculous. They were never going to get to the bottom of what they were talking about. Because, like, you can't mix arguments when you have to focus on what you're trying to achieve. You can't say, lemonade is good, it's better than Coca-Cola, and then you're like, oh yeah, but not if Coca-Cola has been fucking laced with rat poison, and you're like, that's not what we're talking about. Now you argue through a whole other thing in there. What I think, from what I understand, is, like, I think Francis is an anomaly. I think not all fighters, even with McGregor, when he didn't even leave the UFC to do that. Do you know what I mean? He didn't even leave the UFC to do it. To do what Francis did, I think you do have to be an anomaly. I don't know if it's going to be a great decision. I also think like you've got to be willing to go, you know what, if I take a loss, like a bad loss to Tyson Fury, and make no mistake about this, you've got to understand something. If Ngannou didn't drop Tyson, it would be straight, he lost that fight. It wouldn't even be talking about it. I don't think that Ngannou won the fight. I thought it was closer than it needed to be, and I watched it again. Just because I'm, just trying to watch a little bit fresher. And no, I don't think I thought that Tyson won more rounds. Like I said, even when I gave like the reaction thing to it, like first and second was Tyson, 9th and 10th was Tyson, and then there were swing rounds in between. And Ngannou did a phenomenal, like Ngannou, like man, all praise to him. To bet on that though, I don't know that it would have been the smart thing to do. It'd be like closing your eyes and running across the road, making it, and then go and see that's a good idea. Having said that, of course, like the other thing that Ngannou has is the heavyweight division has big draws already, like big draws. Like they are like Anthony Joshua, Wilder, Fury. They're big names, that they're nemesis, they're foes that he can build on and have these big fights with. And especially now, if he had gone out there and got his lips boxed off by Tyson, which could have happened, it would come down to, would he be okay with taking the money that he got paid and walked? Because the money that he was saying, if you sold 60,000 pay-per-views and you got a flat base pay of 10 million, you didn't get an extra 10 million in pay-per-views. You got fucking nothing. You got nothing in pay-per-views. So $10 million is a lot of money too, if that's what he got. Like if you were happy to go, well, I'll take 10 million, because the UFC, he would have got 5 to 700,000 a show plus pay-per-view points, and he wouldn't have got 2. But had he have beat John Jones, he would be massive anyways. Do you get what I mean? So I think that's the thing. Like Ariel was talking like he was right, but he was using revisionist history too. You know what I mean? That's I think that's the part that Chael was kind of like saying, but it got personal and it got heated. 60,000 pay-per-view buyers is nothing. Very, very, very nothing. Through House says, got front rows tickets to Eternal MMA 81 on the Gold Coast tonight. If anyone shadow boxes in the toilets, I'll be sure to steer very clear. I hope you have a good night, my friend. I hope you have a good night, Through House. Landon X says, that Chael and Ariel interview was hilarious. Yeah, it was crazy. Thrill House, thank you very much for your $3 Australian. Uncle, what's your favorite MMA guru impression? I don't know, because I don't listen to them that much, but it makes me laugh anytime he does any kind of Australian accent, because like it just makes me laugh the way he does it, because it doesn't sound like properly Australian. But he does have a good crack at it. And the Australian accent is a hard one to make. Like it's a hard one to do. And people that aren't from Australia don't realize like there's like speech pockets in Australia. Like I don't sound like a lot of other guys from Australia. I live on the South Coast now, but I grew up in Southwest Sydney. So a lot of people from Southwest Sydney sound like this. A lot of people in certain areas of Melbourne will sound like this. Volkanovski is from a pocket in like Wollongong that kind of sounds like me. And it's just funny listening to somebody trying to do those impressions. Like he's done impressions of me in the past, and it just cracks me up, man. It just cracks me up. So it like makes me laugh a lot, because it's not an easy accent to do. And like it's almost the accent here in Australia, if you were to make fun of the way I speak, it's almost like a derogatory thing. I don't get offended by it, but it's almost derogatory. But for him, it's not. He's just doing it online, and it cracks me up. It's not an accent that you go, that's the Australian accent that I'm going to do, you know? So it's a real funny accent because you never hear it outside of Australia. You never hear it impersonated. You never hear that like Southwest Sydney kind of accent when he does like Volkanovski. Volkanovski is not from Southwest Sydney, but he does have a similar accent to people from Southwest Sydney. So it cracks me up when he does like Australian accents or Volkanovski or something like that. Brad Galea says, good Saturday to you, Fab. Oliver Ekman says, Fab, I'm here listening. Demetria says, you're the GOAT, was looking for you in Francis versus Fury. I would have liked to have watched that. Like I didn't watch that fight live. Just to put in perspective. How are you, Oliver and Brad, by the way? You guys are fucking champions. I would have liked to have watched it and everything, but I couldn't anyways. There was a lot of stuff on that Sunday for me, believe me. But just to give you an example, I didn't watch that fight live. I didn't watch that fight live. I wouldn't have watched that fight live. And Kenny says, did you see the pay-per-view on Francis Fury fight? 11,500 US cable buys, 56,000 ESPN plus streams. Yeah, like it's nothing. And like that would have probably been mainly MMA fans, I think, because boxing aficionados themselves wouldn't necessarily have watched that. Like, I think if you're like a hardcore boxing fan, you'd tune in for Fury versus Joshua, for Fury versus Usyk, not for Fury versus Ngannou. Maybe some of these guys don't even know who Ngannou is. So a lot of people would have been MMA fans watching to see how Ngannou goes. And that's probably why a lot of people feel so strongly that Ngannou won. Ngannou fought out of his skin. Ngannou did a fantastic job. Ngannou did better than anyone thought he was going to do. Ngannou, it doesn't it surprised me that he did that well, but it doesn't surprise me that he did well. He's a phenomenal athlete with power in both hands, and his predominant style in the UFC has always been boxing. So it doesn't surprise me that he then went and boxed and did well. Like it's not that surprising. But yeah, it's just crazy. Kenny says Kelvin Gastelum is very talented, but his genetics are shit. No, his genetics are good, dude. He's like, if you meet him in real life, he's like he's a big dude, man. He's like a big, thick dude. It's just not good for middleweight, man. At welterweight, if he can make the welterweight, he's like a heavyweight. His head and his torso is like a heavyweight with his little arms and legs. But he's a really good athlete, man. He's a really, really good athlete. I don't think it's his genetics. I think it's more what he does with his genetics. But he's like a big dude. Like when I met him, I was like, oh, fuck, this guy's big head, big broad shoulders, he's a big dude. Good athlete. I've seen him move around. He moves really, really, really well. But it's, it's a space between the notes that makes the music, and you have to do the whole fucking thing, King Carrot says the MMA guru is in a wheelchair, right? I don't know. I don't think so. Harry DeLuca says I pick the guru in depending on, like I said, it depends what style of fight it is. Kenny says Landon X-face red droopy eyes. Don't know what that is. Harry DeLuca says the wheelchair is just a weapon for him to use in the street fight. Nathan Gorman says, what do you make of the Fury versus Francis fight doing terrible numbers on pay-per-view? Will that affect Francis' negotiation power in the future boxing fights? I already spoke a little bit about it before, so I'll just go into something else when you're saying about it. I don't know exactly how that works because like those like Middle Eastern countries that have big money to put into those things, I don't know how much that in and of itself matters to them, versus the spectacle, versus what they're trying to do. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that. I don't think so, because the spectacle in and of itself. Now I think, to be honest with you, if he fights Wilder, or he fights Fury again, or he fights Joshua, we're all going to buy that. We're all going to buy those pay-per-views. I think that will. I'm not saying he's going to get 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, but he's going to get. The hardcore boxing fans are going to watch it for sure, and I'm going to watch it, and everybody else is going to watch it. We're going to do a fight companion for that one for sure. Whereas I didn't actually do that for that one. I had other shit on that day, man. Trust me, but Yeah, no, this next fight round, like, don't get me wrong, going back to the Chael versus Helwani argument, like the gamble paid off in his favor. It did. He did really, really well. I think it's just acting like you knew that was going to happen. That's like watching, like reading a war history book and going, oh, why did they go that way? They knew the Mongols were going to be there. And like, yeah, you know this, idiot, because you're reading it 1,000 years later. So let me see. Izzy and Alex excel so far in the striking that it makes up for their lack of wrestling prowess, in my opinion. Kenny, yeah, you also got to understand, dude, that in fighting as well, these guys are really long. They framing. They understand distance, which is probably more important than wrestling when you're actually fighting. Provided that you can wrestle, it's a given that you can wrestle, dude. It's a given that you have an understanding of wrestling, and they do. They do. People, are they Bo Nickel? No, they're not. But do they have an understanding of wrestling? Absolutely. Do they have an understanding of distance? More importantly, yes. Do they have an understanding of timing? Absolutely. Do they hit hard? Yeah, they do. You know what I mean? Do they understand how to frame? So you're shooting on these guys from much further away, much, much further away. And if you clinch with them, the levers, because they're so long, they're so tall, their levers create big problems for you, and they know how to strike. It's a different thing. You can't use them as like say you're not them and you go, well, I didn't grow up wrestling and they did well. Like these guys are two of the best strikers to ever do it. Pereira's probably the best combat athlete ever. You if Ngannou wins a world title, then you can say there's Ngannou, right? There's Cejudo and there's Pereira. I can't think of another dude that has done that or something like that. Mario Gomez says, thoughts on Whitaker open to an Usman fight? I think Rob beats Usman, to be honest with you. It goes back to that whole thing, like the mechanical advantage, etc. I don't think Usman has that against Rob, and it's a bad matchup. Even at Dingo's best, like Rob's like silky, fast, moves on his feet, throws leg kicks, throws high kicks. Usman that doesn't have that. Usman's a methodical, come forward guy, put pressure on you, grab you, put you up against a cage, hit your body, take you down, pick you up, take you down, you get up. That's what he does, right? And then he'll fake the shots to the legs and throw overhand right. But that's not going to really work on someone like Rob. I don't think. I don't think. I think it's not a good matchup for Usman. I don't even know if Usman will take that fight. It's not a good matchup for him. You know what I mean? And also because of what's happened with his doing well against Hamzat, kind of like Francis against Fury, you'd want to try and campaign as hard as you can for that Strickland fight. You'd want to be ready, right? Like, let's say whatever happens, Hamzat is going to fight Strickland, and then one of them gets injured. You'd want to be ready to jump in as a replacement. That's what he should be campaigning for, I think. I don't think he's going to want to fight Rob and lose that momentum. Death Note says, how would a prime BJ Penn fare against prime Khabib? Would his BJJ be enough to stop the Dagestani, or would Khabib's top game be too much? The thing is, man, a lot of people don't understand this, and they oversimplify stuff when people go, his BJJ is good, or his judo is good, or his wrestling is good. His wrestling or his judo is good how? What kind of judo did he have? Is he a Kosen judo player where he's primarily going to be a grappler? Or is he a judo player where he was, does these throws, but was he a judo player that relied heavily on the grips, like a Japanese judoka, for example, or was he a Georgian judoka that grew up doing the cultural wrestling and could also do a lot of body locks, a lot of different throws? And with that, I say that BJ Penn, whilst phenomenal grappler, he was more primarily a top game jiu-jitsu player. He wasn't necessarily like, did he have a good guard? Yes, he had a good guard compared to who? To me, yes. But not like, that wasn't his thing. His thing was top game. And I can't see him getting on top of Khabib. I can't see that. I can see him creating problems for Khabib with his boxing because he was a good boxer and he hit hard. and he was notoriously hard to take down. But having said that, I think Khabib would take him down. He'd get on top, and he'd be able to neutralize BJ's ground game. That's what I think. Pep Guard says, how should Almeida try to take down Lewis? I remember Lewis catching Blades with a vicious uppercut. I think Almeida will hesitate coming down the center. Yeah, man, I think that's a real hard one, man, because Lewis gets back up as well, and he hits you on the way there or not. It's going to be an interesting one. I don't know. I just going to be an interesting one. I can't really say too much on that. Mario Gomez says, if Dan Hooker uses his kicks and teeps to keep the distance, how does Green bypass that and close the distance to land shots? Well, you got to kick with a kicker. That's the first thing, and I think he will do that. I think he'll check some kicks and he'll throw some kicks so that Hooker doesn't have it all his way, and that will allow him to lift the leg like he's going to kick and step into punching range, and at the same time switch stances, which covers the distance for him. I think that's what he's going to do, because that's pretty much what he does. Death Note says Holloway shouldn't move to 155. He got blasted by Dustin a few years ago, and that's what I said to you. That's what I think will happen with Gaethje. I think a version of that. Kenny says Max definitely shouldn't move up. He already is lacking power at 145. Nathan Gorman says a few years ago, Khabib said fighters never have two primes and dismissed Jose Aldo's return in form when he moved to bantamweight. I don't know. I can't speculate on that. I think it was one of those things where nobody thought he'd do as well as he did at bantamweight, and just because Jose Aldo managed to do it doesn't necessarily mean that Khabib was wrong, if that makes sense. Again, it goes back to like that Chael and Ariel thing. Like, is it the right decision to make? Like, I've made decisions growing up that were the wrong decisions, but the outcome ended up being right. But I would never do those things again, if you know what I mean. Like, I would never, ever do some of the stuff that I did, but it ended up with a good result. But it was just hubris of youth, et cetera, et cetera. Now, generally, when you see fighters that are at a certain weight division move down in weight as they get older, that's not how your body works, man. That isn't how your body works. But one thing I will say is I've met Aldo in real life, and Aldo's tiny. Like, he surprised me, because you'd hear people saying, Aldo's huge for a lightweight, for a featherweight, and blah, blah, blah. I met him in real life, dude, and he was tiny. Like, it was surprised me how little he was, and he was fighting at featherweight. And I saw him, and I was like, oh, this guy's little, like a little guy. And so him fighting at bantamweight is probably closer to what he should have been fighting at. So Khabib's right in that. Just because Aldo is an anomaly and was able to do it, generally, Frankie Edgar's another guy that, was underweight to fight, But these guys are not the rule. Like, generally, when you see people fight and go down in weight as they get older, they don't do well. Do you see people having two primes? Not necessarily, no. Not unless something happens to the competition. But what happens, dude, generally is you get older, but the contenders get younger. You know what I mean? So it's very hard for you to have two primes. It's very hard for you to go away from it and come back and then go on this big run. It's very hard. Mario Gomez says, when John Jones beat Ngannou, Brendan Schaub said he would beat Ngannou, but when Ngannou had this close fight with Fury, he said Francis would beat Jones. Do MMA pundits suffer from recency bias? Yeah, it's real hard. People only see what's now. They don't see what happened before. That, even to a point that people don't understand. Like a guy trains in Poland for 10 years, and then loses a fight or two fights in Poland, then goes to the US, trains at a big team in the US, and then he wins his next 3 fights, and everything's attributed to this new US camp, because that's the last thing that people have seen. The last 10 years that the guy's been fighting in Poland and been undefeated or whatever, how much skills, how much experience do you think built from there? You know what I mean? Kenny says, I've heard from many that trained with Vittori that say he's one of the most well-rounded, including Bisping. He just doesn't put it together for whatever reason. He does put it together, dude. It's just that he's not as talented as that upper echelon of guys. He's just not, and you can't. He's still a number 6 in the world, number 5 in the world, fought for the title, like pretty impressive. You know what I mean? For someone that when I'm looking at him, I can see he can't move like the way that the upper echelon moves. You can see it. Pepgard says, was GSP versus Johnny Hendricks a robbery? And what were your thoughts on that fight? What did Johnny do to shut down GSP's game for the most part? Well, for the most part, he's a better wrestler than GSP, really good wrestler with dynamite in his hands. And that's going to make it very hard to be taken down. And that was GSP's game. That was GSP's game. From memory, that fight, I was a big GSP fan, so I really was nervous for GSP in that fight. And so I was like, I thought Hendricks was a very bad matchup for him. Credit to GSP for taking the fight. But a robbery is different to you agree with the decision or you don't agree with the decision. It was a very, very close fight. They could have gone to Hendricks, but that doesn't make it a robbery. A robbery is something where it's completely plain to see that the guy lost. It's not I disagree with the decision. Like I say, like when I watched the Peter Yan versus O'Malley fight, when I watched it the first time, I thought that Peter Yan won. But I don't disagree with the decision, if that makes sense. I don't disagree with it. I don't think that was a fucking robbery. That was bad. Nah. Then watching it again, I was like, I think O'Malley might have won that. Like, that's not a robbery. That's just, I think. And then there's fights where I've watched and I think, I don't agree with that decision. But it wasn't a robbery. It wasn't enough to be like a robbery. The fight with Hendricks and GSP, from memory, all right, this we're going back now, it was a very close fight, closer than GSP has had, in his career up until that point, I'm pretty sure, other than like losses and that. And Hendricks did a great job, but it wasn't like Hendricks just smashed him and he just did nothing. And like, it was a close fight. It could have gone to Hendricks. Death Note says, is Wonder Boy the best technical striker in the UFC? I remember his performance versus Masvidal was truly artistic. Strikers. I don't know that you can go, like, Wonder Boy is a very flamboyant, beautiful striker to watch. Is he the best striker in the UFC? Is he the most technical? I don't know. There's Pereira may have something to say about that, like he's very technical. He's a different style of fighter. He's not like a karate guy, so he doesn't look like that. Israel, very, 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 very good striker as well. Like, and Masvidal is not like the same level of, no disrespect to Masvidal, but like Wonder Boy versus Masvidal is not the same as Israel versus Pereira. This is high level striking in MMA. So I think he is a very technical striker. Is he the most technical striker in the UFC? Not necessarily. Kenny just says exactly what I said then. Nathan Gorman says, if Colby beat Leon, how would Colby versus Belal go? I feel like Belal's wrestling could counter Colby's wrestling. From memory, and I'll just check this. I'll just check this so I'm not saying rubbish, but I know Colby's wrestling credentials are high. I'm pretty sure that Belal wrestled in high school. He may have wrestled like a year. Yeah, he wrestled at Bogan High School and attended but did not complete a degree at the University of Illinois. Now, this doesn't mean that he's not a good wrestler, but man, Colby is a very, very, very decorated wrestler, like very high level. Won also a gold medal at the Filler Grappling Games. He's different level of wrestling, and he can also, come forward and strike. Like he's not like a polished striker, but I don't think that Belal will be able to keep Colby off him. I don't see it. And Belal's not young either. They're both in their mid-30s, so I don't think it'll be that simple. Mario Gomez says, if Arman beats Benil, should he get a title shot, considering he will be fresh blood in the division, plus had a close fight with Islam and could give him a hard time if they fight again. If he beats Dariush, yes, I think he should get that. He lost to Gamrot, but I think he should get the fight with Islam. That'll be an interesting fight to watch. Death Note says, when Kamaru was defending his belt, Dana referred to him as the welterweight GOAT. Despite having less title defenses than GSP in his competition, better than GSP's, hence making him welterweight GOAT. I think he's not going to refer to him as not the welterweight GOAT. That's going to sell more tickets. People like this generation of guys won't even remember GSP. They don't even know who GSP is. So that's probably more Dana's promoting his guy, is doing the right thing. Yeah, I don't like and you can't compare competition outside of thing. You know, when they say Masvidal's better than GSP, no, he's not. Masvidal at one time was my favorite fighter. I loved watching Masvidal fight, but he's not GSP. You know, there's a different thing between my favorite fighter and the best fighter, but I loved watching Masvidal fight. I really liked the way he fought, but he was not GSP, and GSP is a different level to that. Kenny said, Till said he got sued for like $2 million for his clothing company using another company's trademark name. I don't even know what to say to that. King Carrot says, Red Pill MMA has made some solid videos lately. He's not bad. I haven't seen any of his videos lately, but he's not bad at all. Shout out to Red Pill MMA. I don't agree with all of the stuff that he says, like, say, for example, from a political perspective or whatnot, but I do agree with a lot of the stuff. I do agree with people making videos from different perspectives. You can't have, and it's not a bad thing to have the UFC rhetoric and narrative running. That's their thing. They need to do that. They need to promote their company, and they're doing a fantastic job, and they're the number one promotion in the world. You know, neck and neck, ONE FC in Asia could make a case for it as well, of course. But, right, you need to have different narratives. You need to have different people giving their point of view. You can't, because some of the stuff, like, say, for example, MMA Guru, like, he would say, like, I would be watching something about certain fighters, and I think, like, can nobody or commentators or whoever would be saying something, and I'd be like, does nobody else see what I see? You know, and then this guy was saying it, and I was like, thank you, breath of fresh air. Pepgard says, what's the difference between Fedor's Sambo versus Khabib's and Islam's Sambo? There's a couple of things, man. I don't know if it's necessarily their Sambo that's different. Number one is Fedor is actually a ranked judoka in Russia. Like, I think he was like third at Russian nationals as a senior, you know. Let me just check that, make sure that I'm not talking rubbish, but I'm pretty sure that he was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he was. Like, and this is a very, very high level. Neither one of those guys is that level of judo. Let me find it, because I'm pretty sure that he was. Yeah, so here we are. A 4-time combat sambo world champion and 2-time Russian national judo bronze medalist. This is very, very high level, right? This is not like these guys that place at that level. Like, you're a fantastic, phenomenal athlete to begin with, right? And number two, the base that you have of judo, like the knowledge of the throws and everything, and your ability to execute those throws is very high. So this is higher level as far as judo is concerned than Khabib or Islam. And the other thing that Fedor had for a heavyweight, he was so fast and he was so light on his feet. His ability to move in and out was so good. The other thing that he had was that he was a massive slugger. Like, he hit like a truck. He hit like an absolute truck. One of the things where people say Sambo is not a real sport, it's not that it's not a real sport, because you could say that about any sport. Every sport was derived from something else, you know, always, you know, so this is not the thing. But the problem is that most of the time, the combat Sambo guys are guys that start off in freestyle wrestling, they get to a certain level in freestyle wrestling, and they're not going to make the Russian national team, which is ridiculously hard to make, and they go to Sambo. the same as judo. Same deal. Like you have a guy, bronze medalist that in judo is super high level in Russia. Now, for you to go to combat sambo, you're not competing at the world level anymore in judo, which is a highly specific, highly competitive, very difficult sport to succeed in. So he was a massive slugger. Like he hit super hard and fast. So he mainly made it a slugfest. Didn't lose many slugfests in his prime. And when you clinched with him, he threw you. And he could throw. He could throw really well. And he could throw from all sorts of different angles. He was very good at that and very good at landing on top. So that's the big difference between them. His ability to move for a heavyweight, like he danced on his toes, man. He was something really, really special for his time. Death Note says, considering how close Izzy versus Anderson Silva was back in 2019, how would a prime Silva fare against Izzy? I feel that Israel would still beat him. I do feel that. I think Israel would still beat him because it was also relatively new into Israel's UFC career, so I think that he would still beat Anderson. He's just a different level of striker, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion because Anderson was a phenomenal MMA fighter, but he didn't fight in MMA a guy like Israel. He didn't do that until he did, but yeah. Ali Shukri says, does Francis have the best chin maybe in MMA history? I don't know. Because there's a lot of guys that have shown off really good chins. People forget Mark Hunt. Look up Mark Hunt. Watch his fight with Krokop. Look at the shots he's taken. Dude. Look up. I did a thing. Look up on my channel. Ray Sefu versus Mark Hunt. Look at that. Watch that fight. Watch Ray Sefu versus Mark Hunt. Some crazy stuff. Michael Kavitia, I hope I said your name right, my brother. Thank you so much. He says, I don't know what a super chat is, but I love the podcast. Man, thank you so much for your support, man. It's so flattering. I really appreciate it. If you haven't, guys, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and share it with your friends. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Joe Schmo says, g'day, gents. Kenny says, for your information, YouTube has their own emotes, but StreamYard doesn't show them. I'll type it out like this. Face red, droopy eyes, face green, smiling, eyes purple, crying. Beetlejuice says, do you see people having 2 prime ribs? Sometimes. Kenny says, I'll have 3 prime ribs, please. Brethren says, will Rob come back on the pod? Mate, Brethren, I love you and I want you to keep supporting the channel, but we're all going to need to move on from this, mate. This has been a long time ago. Kenny says the Till comment was in reference to him being broke. Kenny says, yeah, get some Aussies and New Zealand on, please. Rob, Hooker, Volk, Tuvasa, Craig, Jones, and Hunt. I think I've had every one of these people on my podcast except for Hooker. And honestly, nowadays, it's very hard for me to get people on the show, as far as just time for me to do that. And it's a shit fight. It's a nightmare. And Mitch G says, Sambo is fake. It's well known. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I had a blast. Please join me tomorrow for the fights. I'm looking forward to watching that with you guys and seeing how this goes. So join me tomorrow. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys soon. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.